A lot happened this chapter. I mean, we opened up just right off the bat with Nana talking about how she never thought she'd meet All for One, especially after committing unliving, obviously. But that was just like the beginning of a spiral of just not necessarily new information, but definitely a lot of stuff just being set up for the rest of this arc as we reach the climax of it. I mean, for starters, we've got the fact that All for One was just kind of coaxing Shigaraki, like, I'm gonna take this quirk now, and there's nothing you can really do about it. The combination of our power is too much. As well as kind of just him finally addressing the fact that he didn't necessarily realize that the previous users of One for All were in the quirk, but kind of mentioning that in the past, All for One himself has dealt with guilt. I mean, it's All for One. I don't believe him when he says guilt, but kind of guilt over just the various quirks he's collected and their previous owners being in there and having to talk to them. That was pretty interesting to see, as well as just like the fact that we have to just see him and Shigaraki just kind of almost taunt Nana over the fact that this is the legacy that her family has ended up having because of that power. I mean, in particular, I'll put a screenshot of it on screen. I'm trying to do these chapters a bit differently because of a copyright strike, but in particular, Nana's like just disappointed and almost saddened look when Shigaraki tells her, "Don't worry, grandmother, I blame you as well." That was kind of heartbreaking, and by kind of I mean a lot. Then we kind of start to see One for All itself decay, like just from the sheer hatred that Shigaraki has, which is crazy that he has that much power now. I guess it makes sense with the combination of quirks he now has, but it's still wild. It was also interesting to see that he hates All for One as well, though, because he started to decay as well. Now, before I address the next part, which is probably the part of the chapter that I found most exciting, I do want to point out it's interesting to see that Shigaraki hates both the heroes and One for All as well as All for One, because I think that opens up the possibility of, and I know in interviews Horikoshi has kind of stated that, I mean, Shigaraki isn't really someone that can be saved anymore, but Tomura might be. He said he wanted to leave it up to the imagination. Maybe this is what he meant. Because if Shigaraki kind of becomes more attached to that All for One personality, and Tomura becomes more attached to that original decay quirk, whether or not that was original to him still remains to be seen. Obviously, the theories have been going around that Shigaraki was given that quirk by All for One or by the Doctor, which I do find very plausible, but I do think it's something worth addressing that I think this is the first time we've seen Tomura could be saved. I mean, he doesn't side with heroes at all, obviously, but the fact that he has that hatred for All for One, I think opens up the possibility that he is just chaotic neutral. He is chaos. He wants that destruction, but he doesn't necessarily want that destruction for one side or working towards that side's cause so much as his own hatred for both sides, which was interesting. Now, next part of this chapter is honestly something I never thought we'd just see, period. We finally see the first user of One for All for One's brother himself coming in to save the quirk, quote unquote. All for One obviously saying you should not be acting like you're so tough, you shouldn't be acting like you're so strong. Again, screenshots will probably be on screen, but I did not see this coming. I mean, obviously, with us seeing One for All's users now, and kind of as each quirk has been introduced, getting to see those users as well, I expected to see him at some point, but to see it now was really interesting. Then we kind of see All for One start to taunt him with the fact like, "Oh, I didn't mean to seal you in here," or what a mistake that you give it to such a simpleton is the wording that was used. Again, this is a fan translation, so when Viz's translation comes out, we'll see how accurate that is. But if he used that term, it's interesting to see because he's like, "Oh, you've made a mistake. You've given the quirk to a boy who can't even move in the realm of One for All. He's frozen, can do nothing but move his eyes back and forth." And again, like we saw that callback to like the first couple of chapters with Bakugo a couple chapters ago, we see that now with Deku again. He has the ability and possess the drive to just move despite common sense to save people, and we see that kind of extends to these previous users of One for All as well, because that's how they get out of the One for All realm. His more certain demeanor, I think, is what pushed Shigaraki out, because it's that parallel. Deku, Izuku, has that connection to these previous One for All users where he trusts them, whereas Shigaraki with the previous All for One user has no trust for him, and they coexist sort of, but definitely less so than Izuku and the other One for All users do. And I think that's what allowed him to save the quirk, as he put it. There is a I didn't lose my power, but, again, screenshot on screen now, that I found interesting because it just alludes to there could be more to this fight. However, I do think this might be it for the fight for now, because Deku basically pleads, please don't move anymore, which could be taken two ways. It could be taken as, I'm too beat up to keep fighting as well, which with that butt, maybe his arms are too beat up, maybe it's his whole body, maybe he just doesn't think he can fight back anymore. But I think we're seeing Izuku kind of want to save Tomura. I don't know if it's possible, but I think it'll tie into what we see at the end of the chapter with Toga, which I'll get to in a bit. But in particular, very, very slight, just 2-3 panel kind of thing. Dabi finally talking about Endeavor, Shigaraki and Endeavor. This could be when we see that whole theory just come to fruition. I mean, I say theory, but it's basically confirmed at this point. We could finally see Dabi be addressed as Endeavor's lost son. That would be cool. I would like to see that next chapter, or next 2-3 chapters, soon at least. That's set up. That's cool. Mainly, though, Toga, stabby stab. She's talking about losing twice, and what it means to be a hero, and where do they draw the line? They're supposed to save people, and they're supposed to protect people, so did they not see twice as a person, and where do they draw the line? She wants to ask that to Deku and Uraraka, and I think that'll be interesting, because, and I know someone pointed this out, like she hasn't killed people. I think that's missing the point here. She acknowledges what she's doing is wrong by their standards, but she's pointing out the hypocrisy in their actions, whereas they see the hypocrisy in hers. I think it's that kind of intermingling that could work to make these chapters more interesting, and in particular with what I was saying with Deku maybe wanting to save Shigaraki. Even if this is where that fight ends, which I think is very plausible, they're both very beat up right now. Not the arc and the war, mind you, just Shigaraki versus Deku. I do think we could still be seeing just that question addressed, and that be Deku's answer. I want to save these people. I want to save whoever I can, because that's who Izuku is. He doesn't want to give up on these people. Now, you can have your thoughts on that. I don't know if I see Shigaraki being saved, because Shigaraki is a destructive force right now. I mean, as All For One put it, he is the symbol of fear as of now. But I do think it's an interesting question to be addressed, because whether he ends up killing him or saving him, Izuku being, as he's put at the start of the series, the next best hero after All Might, it's something he's going to have to deal with at some point and come to terms with either way, and I think just like the Gentle and Labrava fight forced him to confront what his definition of a hero was and when it's okay to be selfish in that definition, it's going to force him to confront when it's okay to either stand by that for the sake of putting others in danger or push it aside for the sake of the greater good. Either way, I think it's going to be an interesting topic to see addressed, and that's kind of where the chapter ends, but it feels like a lot happened this chapter, and it did, and it was so good. Again, I know I keep saying this every week, and I don't know why you'd end up here if you haven't read the manga, but please, if you haven't already, read the manga. My one complaint used to be that the art for the fights wasn't as good as in the anime, and it still isn't, because it's hard to convey that sense of action and just fluidity and movement in manga panels versus animation just by nature. But I think we're seeing how much Horikoshi has improved since he started publishing My Hero in this current arc, really, because all the fights have been really well done, including this current Shigaraki and Deku fight, which I found most impressive with it being in the air for as much as it has, and on the ground, and with Decay. Just a lot of great moments. Now, make no mistake, I don't blame you if you're an anime only, but I don't feel like reading the manga will ruin the anime in any way anymore. I almost feel like they're two completely separate experiences. Overall, though, exceptional chapter. Anyways, guys, My Hero Deku, signing off.